When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know to finally achieve the level of success that you deserve. Got wealth? I'm sure you've heard the statistics that Black Americans have 1/10 the wealth of their white counterparts. And you may even have heard the stories about how Black folks spend their or wear their wealth or have poor money habits. So we should just pull ourselves up from the bootstraps to achieve financial success. Well, here's what they don't want you to know about the wealth gap. The first thing is that actually public policy created the wealth gap. And then secondly, even when Blacks do acquire assets, they're taken or robbed from them. And then finally, if you are going to achieve the level of success and close your own personal wealth gap, you've got to learn how to turn your income into wealth. And that's why I'm so excited to have a conversation with our guest today. He has spent decades in the financial journalism area and now contributes to U.S. News and World Report in writing a column. But what I'm most excited about is his newest work, his book, which is Fixing the Racial Wealth Gap. Racism and discrimination put us here, but this is how we can fix the future. And I'm excited to welcome my friend Rodney Brooks to Get Wealthy. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Deborah.
Well, let's talk about, first I want to say, you've spent all this time in personal finance, and now you're a fellow as well, which I didn't mention, with a think tank, Prosperity Now. Correct. What had you shift to focusing on the racial wealth gap?
Well, when people have been telling me for years, I think including you, that I needed to write a book that was basically a personal finance guide for Black Americans. And during the pandemic, it made sense to combine it with the wealth gap. So basically, you can't talk about why we are as Black people where we are unless you talk about how we got here. And thus the wealth gap. So I dealt with in the first chapter basically a history of all the things that have been done to Black folks, from slavery to to Tulsa and more. Because we're taking it out of context if we just say our wealth, the wealth of a Black family is only 1/10 of a white family. So you have to have some history, and I think that as a financial planner, that you have to have that context because we have special problems and we have special needs.
Special problems and special needs. Well, I alluded to that. I'm going to be honest with you. My good friend, Dr. Rocky Moore Cummings, really schooled me, because that's the work that she had done for many, many years on the wealth gap. I was like, well, if folks just learn how to invest, they'll be okay. She was like, oh, no. And it's systemic. And I think that's really what you are bringing our attention to, illuminating and aware and making us aware of, because you can't not change what you will not acknowledge, right? Like to the point that I was making earlier about, if we just pull ourselves up from our bootstraps, we will not that it isn't important, the whole financial literacy piece. But now I want to talk a little bit about on Get Wealthy. One of the things we have is a framework, and that framework is called Mindset, Strategy, and Execution. And it's really designed to give a roadmap of how you're going to address a specific challenge or situation. And so I want to look at it, the wealth gap from that framework. So I want to start with mindset. And so my question to you to begin with, Rodney, is in terms of mindset, what's the shift that needs to be made if we're actually going to change the wealth gap, make an impact?
Well, one of the things is basically if any of these solutions is aimed at anyone, and some of them are policy solutions. If you don't have the right frame of mind and you don't have the right literacy skills, you're going to be right back where you were before. Okay, so and I'm sure you've seen the studies about the lottery winners, how a large percent of people who win the lottery end up bankrupt, and that's because they don't have the mindset and the skills. You have to know how to manage the money, and you have to know when to say no when your friends and relatives come and ask you for money. You have to know what's going to return an investment. Even educated people make bad decisions. Because I talked to a financial planner who told me about a black couple who were entrepreneurs, and they turned a profit. And the first thing they went out and did was bought a new Porsche for him and a new BMW for her, and paid cash. So it's not just uneducated, and it's not just low income people. We all need to be educated about what's going to be a return on our investment, and cars is not one of them.
Yes, and what I would say to that point about mindset in terms of attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors individually, I do think that part of it is kind of that success blueprint that we were all given. I know I'm a boomer, you're a boomer, and it was, go to school, get a good job, earn an income. Hopefully you'll stay with a company that has a pension, and all will be right with the world. Well, we know that sort of safety net in terms of pension has been turned on its head, and you've been writing about that for years.
Right.
But I guess the point I want to make is that if we were to look at even when Black folks do get educated or know how to save, right, effectively, what they haven't learned how to do is to invest. You keep talking about return on investment. So I guess that the question I have is, we are very risk averse. At least that's what I've seen in the work that we do at Wealthy You. We are more interested in not losing, right, than we are growing our money. And so as it relates to mindset, what do you think can help people to make that shift so they are thinking about return on investments and not just saving?
Well, one of the things I always say first is hire a financial advisor, a financial planner, a CFP, certified financial planner, because you need to. Okay, they serve many functions. I mean, and we both know there are rules. You need to interview them. You need to find somebody you're comfortable with, but one of the things they could do is talk you out of that mindset and say, okay, here are some investment alternatives that you may not have thought about. Mutual funds instead of insurance. I mean, that's one of my big pet peeves is Black folks are still buying those insurance products for investments for their children, and that's not the best form. So, and get them into safe, mutual funds and exchange traded funds, as opposed to individual stocks, which are riskier. Once you need somebody who can talk you down when the market goes down, like the recent bear market we've had. I've had friends call me up and say, should I, I'm worried now. Well, that's one of the things your advisor does. It's like,
yeah, but to your point though, so I want to challenge that a little bit, Rodney,
okay.
because here's what I've seen is that part of the reason people are in some of these products are because of advisors, right? Like you and I know, and we can just be frank, you are you've done your study and done retirement planning. And what we're seeing, what I see is that a lot of people are put into these products with the kind of guise that this is a safe investment, that, whether it's insurance product or whole life or whatever. I mean, I think that's what you're alluding to. And it frustrates me too. And it was because they did go to someone and they didn't quite actually understand what they were getting themselves into.
Well, that's part of it. If you don't understand it, don't get into it. But the other part is, we know there's a dozen different designations for a financial planner. You don't have any kind of degree to be called a financial planner, but you do have to pass a test to become a certified financial planner. And you can go to an insurance salesman and he or she will put you in a product and say, I'm a financial planner. And sometimes, an annuity is a good example, because an annuity is not a good idea for everyone. Okay. And I'm not anti-annuity. They make sense sometimes, but you have to understand what you're doing. And then if you're talking to a financial advisor or anyone, and you don't understand what they're putting you into, then that's a sign. Go to someone else. Go to someone who walks you through it and makes you understand what they're doing. I was talking to a couple who both of them had 401ks, and they had a relative who was basically telling them to pull the money out of both of their 401ks and put them in annuities. And I advised against it, but they did it anyway. At some point,
right? And oftentimes, again, that really does go back to mindset and that belief. And I think often why people opt into that strategy is because they're telling them, oh, you can still get the market, but you can never lose your money. And it goes back to that whole mindset of being focused more on, I call it the income mindset or the fixed mindset, right? So when we come back, I want to get right into the second part of the framework, and that's strategy, right? So we talked about mindset. So what does our audience need to actually know in order to kind of navigate this, what can be a pretty complex financial marketplace? So don't go anywhere, folks. My conversation is with Rodney Brooks. We're talking about his new book around really fixing the racial wealth gap. Don't go anywhere. Next, it's strategy. We'll be right back.
Attention! We're back, bigger and stronger than ever. Season 2 is reloading May 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
What's up?
Being a black man, we gotta stop letting this slide.
With new hosts.
Let me tell you what damn time it is.
And big celebrity surprises.
Kiss my behind, it's Oprah Winfrey.
Subscribe today at Truth Talks Live.
Give black people what they need, and we'll show them for you.
And don't miss out on all the upcoming viral moments.
Simulcasting weeknights at 8 p.m. on Roland Martin Unfiltered and Black Star Network and Truth Talks Live. I'll see you there.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this conversation that I'm having with author and financial journalist Rodney Brooks. We're discussing his new book about fixing the racial wealth gap. Rodney, thank you so much. That's why I love having conversations with you, because I know that we're going to have frank conversations, right? And I feel like that's what this audience needs to understand. And so now I want to talk about strategies, and certainly one of them that you brought up in our mindset segment was about dealing with a financial advisor. And so I want to talk about, from your vantage point, and you do a lot of writing on this, is if I'm listening to this conversation, I'm saying, they just described me. What kind of strategy do I need to think about if I'm truly going to be prepared for retirement and close my own personal wealth gap?
Well, the first thing I do, I generally recommend, and people generally don't even think about it, is before you start a savings plan, you need to have that emergency fund. Okay. Study after study has shown that most Americans, black or white, cannot afford a $1,000 emergency. They either most of them have to go to a credit card or borrow something from a friend, and we don't want people to go to a payday lender. So first thing I say is, before you even start setting aside money, and this money needs to be in cash. So this is, whereas we all recommend against bank savings accounts because they pay no interest, but you got to have it in cash, because if the furnace breaks down, if your car breaks down, if a new hot water heater, you need to have money that is in cash, that you don't have to go to your investment accounts and pull money out of money that is fully invested, because that's a bad idea.
No, I love that, Rodney. An emergency fund is important, and so I really want to kind of go one step further and talk about not only that emergency fund, but debt, right? So I know there like personal finance experts who say you've got to pay off all your debt before you start investing. If someone, does, I think the first place to start really is just taking an accounting of where you stand, right? Like, looking at a financial statement, and so that and hey, yeah, all I want to say to our audience is just writing down everything you own and everything you owe. And so I think a lot of times what really prevents people from making any headway, Rodney, is they could be consumed with debt. Now we're talking about student loan debt, and we know that President Biden just came out with some relief, but we know people are carrying significant amount of debt. What do you say to someone that does say, okay, I know I need an emergency fund, but I've got this debt looming at me? How can I get my still invest in my 401k and those other strategies that we're talking about?
Some financial planners talk about things in terms of good debt and bad debt, and I don't. I think debt is debt, right? So I could say that there's bad debt and there's worse debt, and you have debt like credit card debt. Okay, that, the average credit card interest rate is something like 24%, incredibly high. That's the debt you want to get rid of. That should be high on your list. So it's basically, we're talking about stages, Deborah. Okay, so we want to pay down debt, and we want to start creating this emergency fund, and we know things get in the way. People get married, they have children, they got to buy a house, buy a car. But the easiest way to save, and I say, is the company sponsored 401k. Even if you just contribute up to what the company is matching, and we all call that free money. At the very least, put in your 401k up to what the company matches, and you will get that company match. But yeah, it is a good idea to pay down, especially credit card debt. Student debt is a whole other thing, because some people have hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I would not say try to pay that off before you get on an investment plan. It has to be part of your investment plan.
No,
Okay.
I really welcome you all debt is bad, but there's debt and then there's worser debt.
Right.
Right. And what I really like about how you just characterize that it is true. You know, we often talk about the rule of 72, take the interest rate and the return you're earning on your investment divided into 72. And that'll tell you how long it'll take your money to double. But what I also tell people, that works in reverse on debt, right? So if you have 24% interest and you divide that into 72 and all you're paying is the minimum balance, that means that the principal itself is going to double, right, in less than 3 years. And so that I really welcome the fact that you shared, you know, like help people understand that there's student loan debt and then there's credit card debt. And that's the one that you want to get rid of because that can increase really quickly. Love this conversation, Rodney. So, you know, we've talked about mindset and just people really feeling like sometimes they want to reward themselves if they have some financial success. And the other aspect of that is people going into the wrong types of investments that aren't going to make their money grow. And so the next thing I want to talk about with you is just execution. Like we talk a lot on Wealthy You about, we're giving people a lot of knowledge. And, you know, we talked about financial advisors and that sort of thing. Next, I want to talk about execution. What do people need to do to really apply some of this information that we're talking about? So don't go anywhere, folks. My conversation today is with Rodney Brooks. And when we come back, we're going to get to the last aspect of our mindset strategy execution framework with Rodney Brooks about what you need to do right now. So don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
I'm Deborah Owens, host of Get Wealthy and also known as America's Wealth Coach. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. We're talking about the racial wealth gap and what we need to do in order to address it with our guest, Rodney Brooks, who's written a book on the topic. Rodney, next I wanted to talk about execution, but I want to shift just a little bit. I know we're talking about the personal aspect of money management, but I do think that the most important aspect of your book is that the fact that you basically said, you didn't say, oh, well, the government, racism could be a part of it. You basically, in your title, you said that, racism created this divide. And so I want to talk about what folks need to be, the conversations and the kind of engagement, right, that people need to have to get some of these policies changed, because they still are presenting themselves. And I think about this redlining, right? This recent couple that it was the wrong person to redline, but their house was valued hundreds of thousands of dollars less. And so from the standpoint of closing this, eliminating this racial wealth gap, what needs to happen?
So you talked earlier about Maya Rockeymoore Cummings, so she'll tell you in a minute, financial literacy won't help if you don't have any money, right? So,
that's right. That's what I love about her.
So Maya, by the way, wrote the foreword in my book.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, she's really an amazing person.
Yes, so, I mean, my point is that financial literacy is a part of it, but many economists say that's not the only part. So other parts are dealing with this racism and discrimination that over the years have stripped us of our wealth. Like, for instance, I wrote about basically when the GI Bill was passed to benefit the veterans returning from World War II. The Southern states did everything they could to exclude Black veterans from the benefits, including, the help in buying homes and student loans, VA loans, and Levittown, for instance, was where they built homes for returning veterans. They would not let Black veterans live there. So institutionalized racism. Black veterans were not able to build generational wealth through their homes the way white veterans were. So you look at instances like that and talk about the racism, and it was overt racism. Generation after generation, we don't have that housing wealth. So you have to do some policy things. And some of the things I talked about was particularly reparations was one. William Darity and his wife wrote a book, From Here to Equality, particularly saying reparations, that America owes Black people reparations in the amount that would bring our wealth, Black Americans' wealth, to even with white Americans, and that would be like $12 trillion. That's controversial. I don't know if it'll ever pass Congress, but there are some housing programs where we can get where we can offer some kind of assistance in housing to get more. There's a plan to increase the number of Black households who own homes with a variety of programs, educational loans, and grants. And there is actually a program that worked in Compton, the former mayor there, where they actually paid they actually paid a stipend to low-income Americans. It was like $500, and they paid them a stipend, and they improved their health, wealth, and their psychology when they went back and
their well-being. Absolutely.
Right.
I guess the point that I wanted to make about your work is that, yes, illuminating this and making people aware that so much of the racial wealth gap has less to do with, it's not only behavior, right? To Maya's point, if you don't have any money, where are you going to be able to invest it? And, one of the things that I've seen most recently is that because of the pandemic, the wealth gap is widening. And what we're also seeing with millennials who now are like above, or in terms of population, the second largest population and about to overtake boomers, is that it's taking them much longer to be able to purchase a home. Now we have interest rates going up. Now we have affordability. And we also have seen real estate prices during the pandemic increase. And a lot of this is being driven by actual investors, right, buying these homes. And so the whole supply demand aspect of it comes in, where now that you've got less supply, it's making home ownership out of reach. And so I wanted to just get your thoughts on what you brought up, the point of what was happening in Compton. We see that even redlining is still happening. What do you think our viewers need to know and do so that this significant part of building wealth is not out of reach for them?
Well, one thing we really did not talk about was the 2008 crisis, because Black folks still have not recovered from that. And then we went into the pandemic. And when things like that hit, Black folks are hit harder, and the impact is longer. So Black Americans lost 40% of their wealth during the 2008 crisis, and we're still suffering. And then the pandemic hits. So we're way behind. So so that's where I start talking about generational wealth. We need to we need to do wills and estate planning. We don't do that. We need to pass on generational wealth. I talked to one financial planner who says we need to stop having just enough life insurance company to put ourselves in the ground. Basically, leaving life insurance to your heirs is a tax-free way, okay, to leave the money.
No, and you know what, you bring up a very important point, and because I want to clarify this, because I don't want people to say, well, they just said don't buy life insurance, right? But to your point, you said, I'm not against life insurance, but I think this is a real opportunity to educate our audience, right? About in terms of when you buy something, buy it based on the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? So if you're investing and it is to build wealth, then you want to use investment vehicles like stocks and that sort of thing. If you want to leave an estate, then insurance, that is the whole purpose of it, right? And it has that other caveat, and that is one of the few investment that can pass to your heirs tax-free, because basically whoever you name on that beneficiary as the beneficiary, or if you have a trust and you name them, that money is goes to you, the check goes to you. There are no, distribution forms or anything like that come into play. So you bring up a very good point. So I notice in other cultures too, that they use estate planning as a tool. Like families will come together and they will actually pay the premiums for their parents, knowing that it's going to leave an estate. So is that the kind of strategy that you feel like could help to close this wealth gap?
Yes, and I'm we need to differentiate between whole life and term life, and
yes.
In term life we're talking about
or permanent,
yes,
right? Permanent versus why is it escaping exactly what it says? Term, right? Like whole life you have through your whole life, and whereas term you have to renew it. And sometimes when you do that, right, it could be higher. And so it is not permanent in that regard.
Right. And the thing about it, though, is that term life, though it is a certain term, you're not trying to combine an investment with an insurance product, which I think many people get confused about, and it's that keeps it simpler. So yeah, whether you do whole life or term life, have enough in life insurance to leave something to your heirs. And one other option I want people to think about is the 529 plan. This is basically to provide college tuition for your children or your grandchildren. And the 529 plan, they're operated by states, and they're different kinds, but basically it's sort of like an IRA. You put money in that's tax deferred, and your children or your grandchildren can use it for college education. So you're not trying to figure out, okay, am I gonna have to pull money out of my 401k to pay college tuition? If you plan it out with something like a 529 plan, that money can be paid for even for private school tuition. So
that's a recent change too,
right.
which I thought was interesting, but I feel like that law really benefited high net worth individuals more so than it did, the average working American. And so your point in terms of strategy is that goes back to our earlier conversation around our students carrying much more debt, right? I think the average student loan debt for African Americans is about $33,000 versus $22,000 with our counterparts. And so I do want to ask your opinion, though, Rodney. I know it just came out, but what are your just kind of top line thoughts on the whole student loan debt and this program that has just been is going to be implemented by the Biden administration?
Well, for some people, any kind of relief. I know people 50 who are still paying off college loans with incredible amounts of debt, like $75,000 and $100,000 that signed loans when they were 16, 18, and they're still suffering. So I think what Biden is doing is going to be helpful, but for people who have an enormous amount of student debt, there has to be some other alternatives, because some of this debt was these young kids signed up for loans that were charging 15% interest. Okay, if you wonder how it blew up like that.
Yeah. And I mean, and a lot of that was private loans. And what we do know is, going back to public policy, right? Some changes in privatizing student loans really, we are in a capitalistic society. Really, what it did, it was almost predatory lending. We do know that the Biden administration also basically wiped out a lot of debt for some of those vocational schools and schools that were basically degree mills, right? That had all these egregious interest rates, and people would get out and basically not get a return on investment.
And many of those were black folks, by the way.
What's that?
Many of those were black folks who got degrees, who spent tuition at those schools. Many were Black Americans.
Yes, and so I guess when we come back, it's our analyze, optimize, maximize segment, Rodney, and that's where I like to kind of buttonhole everything that we've talked about today, so that people can walk away from the program and say, okay, based on the conversation that they had today, this is maybe what I need to do next. So don't go anywhere, folks. It's our Analyze, Optimize, Maximize segment coming up next.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, host of Get Wealthy, and I hope you've been enjoying this conversation with Rodney Brooks, who's recently written a book about the racial wealth gap and what needs to be done. And Rodney, thank you so much. I know we've covered a lot of ground. And now what I want to do for our audience, I think what happens is you listen to all of the obstacles and the challenges that have prevented Black folks from achieving a certain amount of financial independence and which allows them to create generational wealth. And so I want to begin with your book, and you covered a lot in it, and just about analyzing from your standpoint of everything that you learned, what is the most significant insight that you gained from it?
Probably the most significant thing I gained and actually learned was that financial education and literacy is not going to change the wealth gap. Okay, what is required is public policy, new programs for housing, programs that would actually put wealth in the Black community, and financial literacy, I think, has to be a part of it. But you have to look at things like baby bonds, for instance, which I didn't talk about earlier, and that's basically baby bonds are. Senator Booker has a bill for baby bonds that would basically, if baby is born, they get $1,000, and an equal amount every year until they're 18, and what they actually get when they get 18 depends on the income of the family. But Morningstar said baby bonds would cut the wealth gap in half. So there are policies that the government can implement, but the question is whether they will ever do it.
And so much of that, though, and that's really the point of having this conversation, and why I was so excited about your book and the work that you're doing, because I think what is important is that the most important thing we can do is dispel myths. Right. And so I love that. That was the insight that you gained, was like, we've been on this financial literacy thing, but hey, it's not just knowledge, right? Like there are real obstacles preventing folks from achieving success. And then analyze, optimize, right? So if you were to think about now, as someone who's listening to this conversation, if there was one thing that people could do to really accelerate their own individual financial standing, what would that be?
I would say, if you have a company-sponsored 401k or 403b, maximize it. Okay, that's long-term growth. We talked about the rule of 7, and that's long-term growth. But don't just try to figure out how to invest in your 401k yourself, okay? Because everyone's not smart about which funds to invest in, okay? And as you said, Deborah, earlier, we tend to be very conservative investors. Because somebody told me when the crash happened in 2008 that my 401k didn't really go down, and I said, how is that even possible? Well, it turned out it's possible because they were invested in
the
bonds,
stable value fund.
Right.
I know, and so You make such a great point. I mean, I know that we've covered a lot of ground, and I love that you said, well, when I said optimize, you were like maximize, and that is the last point. And so just based on maximizing your own opportunities, like I really feel like people have opportunities that are right in front of them, but they can't see them because they don't understand what they are. And I would love it if you could leave perhaps us with a story, because you've written a lot of stories about someone who was able to apply some of these concepts that we're talking about and now see themselves on the other side and feeling much more confident about their financial situation.
Yes, I did. I did a story for a magazine on a young couple, and who had a young daughter, and they had they basically became Dave Ramsey disciples, and they basically followed his advice. And because of that, they were both professionals. They were in Philadelphia. They both had maxed out their 401ks and had early on started a 529 plan for her daughter. She had a daughter before they got married, but she had started. And one of the things I did not mention about the 529 that's cool about the 529 is you can tell parents, grandparents, friends, instead of, buying a sweater or a dress for Christmas or birthday, make a donation to this 529 plan. So you can have all your family members making donations to help you build this. So that by the time this kid is 18, they all have a nice, they won't come out of college with the kind of debt that we did.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And it's often something that I really promote in Wealthy You. And that is, rather than your family giving gifts that, things go in and out of style, to invest in that 529. Rodney Brooks, you've given us a lot of insight today. Thank you so much for coming on Get Wealthy.
Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. Well, when we come back, I'll share the 3 things you need to take away from today's show.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just 2 millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
We covered a lot of ground, and I hope that most of all you understand that, yes, there are some challenges, and it's not all going to be remedied by just you getting more knowledgeable, but that you have to understand you've got to get engaged so that you can impact public policy. So here are the 3 things that you should have learned from today's show. 1, that the racial wealth gap, a large part of it was created by public policy. Secondly, is you need to increase your own financial knowledge if you're going to be able to navigate this marketplace with all of the complex products that are being put before you. And then finally, and I always leave here, knowledge is not power. Knowledge correctly applied is. And so apply what you learned today. And certainly Rodney Brooks left a lot of gems for you to apply. So that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks so much for joining us on Get Wealthy right here, only on Black Star Network.